Hello there. Welcome to my review of the 5th episode of Season 1 of Columbo, Lady in Waiting. First broadcast on the 15th of December 1971 on NBC. Written by Stephen Bochco, based on a story by Barney Slater. Slater was born January 21st, 1923 in North Carolina. Not much is known about his life, but his first produced screenplay was the Irene Dunne, Dean Jagger comedy It Grows on Trees in 1952. He wrote several films and was nominated for an Oscar for The Tin Star, starring Henry Fonda and Anthony Perkins. He also wrote for many TV shows, including Bat Masterson, Gilligan's Island, Mission Impossible, and 20 episodes of Lost in Space, along with providing this story for Columbo. He died in 1978. He was 55. The episode was directed by Norman Lloyd. Lloyd was born Norman Lloyd Perlmutter on November the 8th, 1914, in New Jersey. He left full-time education at the height of the Depression and decided not to pursue an academic career, as he felt there were little to no opportunities for professionals at the time. So, at 17, he joined the Civic Repertory Theatre in New York and quickly moved to Broadway. During his time in the social theatre group, Theatre of Action, he met fellow actor Peggy Craven, who he would later marry. He was then invited to be a founder member of Orson Welles and John Houseman's Mercury Theatre, to great success, before moving into film. He missed an opportunity to appear in Citizen Kane when he was ill-advised to return to New York rather than join the cast of this likely flop. Upon returning to Hollywood, he was cast as the villain in Hitchcock's Saboteur, and later worked with Hitchcock again in Spellbound. Through his friendship with Hitchcock, he was given a chance to direct on the anthology TV series Alfred Hitchcock Presents. He would continue to act sporadically over the next 2 decades before landing a recurring role as Dr. Daniel Auslander in St. Elsewhere, appearing in 132 episodes over 6 years. He would return to film as Mr. Nolan in Dead Poets Society and continue to split his time between film and television and between acting and directing, appearing in, amongst other things, The Age of Innocence, Murder, She Wrote, Star Trek The Next Generation, and In Her Shoes, before his final on-screen appearance at the age of 100 in the Judd Apatow film Trainwreck. Lloyd died May the 11th, 2021. He was 106. The episode begins with a shot of Los Angeles at night before fading in on a house where a woman is creeping around the room of a man asleep in bed. She removes a key from his keychain and creeps out. This opening scene has a very Hitchcockian feel, with the music and some of the shot selections, and feels more like the setup of a mystery, as we don't know how this will tie into the upcoming murder. Nor do we find out straight away. It's no surprise that Lloyd and Hitchcock were friends, as there are a few scenes like this in this episode, and Columbo certainly lends itself to that Hitchcockian style. We next see the man and the woman having breakfast together. She is Beth Chadwick, and her brother, Bryce is played by Richard Anderson. Anderson was another New Jersey native, born on August the 8th, 1926, and he served in the US Army during World War II. He began his acting career in radio and on stage before becoming a contract player with MGM in 1950. He would go on to make dozens of appearances in character roles in various MGM films, including The Magnificent Yankee and Forbidden Planet, as well as Paths of Glory for Stanley Kubrick. He would also have a very busy television career, eventually becoming a series regular on Perry Mason for 26 episodes, as well as making many one-off appearances in such shows as The Mod Squad, Alias Smith and Jones, Mannix, and of course Columbo, but is perhaps best known for playing Oscar Goldman, Steve Austin's boss, in The $6 Million Man. He would continue to act throughout the 80s and 90s before retiring. He died on August the 31st, 2017. He was 91. As they have breakfast, Bryce accuses Beth of sulking over his objections to her relationship with a lawyer who works for their company. Bryce suspects the lawyer of being a gold digger and has written him a letter telling him to end the relationship or he will be fired. Bryce is a really nasty piece of work.
If your name wasn't Chadwick and you didn't have all of this, do you think that, do you really think that Peter Hamilton would give you a second look?
And is viciously controlling of Beth, which she clearly resents, but isn't self-assured enough to stand up to him. When Bryce leaves, she asks Charles the butler if tomorrow is his day off. She later receives a call from her boyfriend Peter Hamilton, who is away for work and returning that night. She arranges to meet him the following day. Hamilton is played by Leslie Nielsen in one of his pre-airplane dramatic roles. Nielsen was born in Saskatchewan, Canada on February the 11th, 1926, and served in the Canadian Air Force during World War II. He began his acting career in 1950, appearing in a variety of television shows before moving into film in 1956 with Ransom, and alongside Richard Anderson in Forbidden Planet. He would continue to carve out a successful career as a serious actor for the next 2 decades, including playing the captain of the ill-fated Poseidon in The Poseidon Adventure, amongst other roles, including 2 appearances in Columbo, before the career-defining role of Dr. Rumack in Airplane, which firmly established him as a comedy star, something which he embraced. His regular appearances on chat shows would be accompanied often by an electronic farting machine that he would activate throughout his conversation.
Although I will do almost anything I can for a laugh.
Well, just a little bit.
I mean, I'm always associated with being, a man who has a background and education, and I'm well-mannered, and, I have to protect that image.
That's the other thing about the humor is you have to pay attention to it.
He would continue to perform in dramatic roles, but with characters such as Frank Drebin in Police Squad and in its spin-off Naked Gun films, he would forever be thought of as a comedy actor. He continued acting right up until his death from pneumonia on the 28th of November 2010. He was 84. That evening, with Bryce out of town, Beth sabotages the light in the front porch and switches the alarm on before getting ready for bed. Lying in bed with a gun on her lap, we see a vision of what she is planning to happen. With Bryce returning home, unable to open the door with the key that she removed and switched for one that doesn't work, he goes to the unlocked French windows of her bedroom and sets off the alarm. When he comes in, she shoots him dead. She replaces the switched key and breaks the window, making it look to the police as if he had dropped his key in the dark and broke the window to get in, which she mistook for a burglar and shot in self-defense without looking. We then return to the real world, where Hamilton has returned home to find the letter from Bryce, and as a result decides to go to the Chadwick house to confront him. In the meantime, Bryce returns home, but unbeknownst to Beth, he has a spare key hidden in the flower pot by the front door, which he retrieves to enter the house. Hamilton arrives at the front gates just as Beth shoots Bryce when he appears in her room at her bedroom door. Hamilton hears the shots and jumps the gates as Beth sounds the alarm and quickly tries to recover back towards her plan by moving the body, switching the keys back, breaking the window and putting Bryce's briefcase outside. Hamilton arrives and Beth tells him her version of what happened. This is another departure from the episodes we've seen so far and the formula as we come to know it in a few different ways. Beth is a very sympathetic murderer with an overbearing brother who has been controlling her life as their father had done before he died. She plans out what might have been the perfect murder because she isn't trying to create an alibi, but it goes horribly wrong, and we see both how it's supposed to work and how it actually turns out. At this point in the story, we kind of want her to get away with it. We aren't automatically on Colombo's side from the off. The police arrive and we see Colombo reading a newspaper. Beth and Hamilton are talking to some other detectives, and Beth says she didn't go out all that day because she wasn't feeling very well. Colombo overhears this. I think this is the point where Colombo knows she did it. He doesn't know if the lawyer boyfriend is involved, but he's pretty certain that she murdered her brother in cold blood. The other detectives seem to buy her story of how it was an accident, and they all leave. The next day, Beth's mother arrives as Colombo is inspecting the porch light, and in a funny little scene she mistakes him for the help, so asks him to pay for the taxi she arrived in and carry her bags, which he does. As well as being very entertaining, it also immediately establishes her character as another domineering person in Beth's life. He chats with her briefly before Beth appears, and her mother slaps her, and, acknowledging that it was an accident, still continues to berate Beth for killing her son. Beth Chadwick is played by Susan Clark. Clark was born Nora Golding in Ontario, Canada, on March the 8th, 1943. She began her acting career in the UK in a wide variety of television shows, including hospital drama Emergency Ward 10 and the sketch comedy series The Benny Hill Show, before returning to America and gaining leading roles in films such as Coogan's Bluff and Valdez's Coming, as well as on TV shows like Barnaby Jones and this appearance in Columbo. She would go on to appear in films like Airport 1975 and The Apple Dumpling Gang and Murder by Decree, displaying her aptitude for comedy and drama before gaining a recurring role in Webster, appearing in 150 episodes as Catherine. She would continue to act in film and television into the early 2000s. She is 78. After she's done, Beth goes to get Colombo some coffee, and Mrs. Chadwick eulogizes Bryce and talks Beth down, including agreeing with Bryce's assessment that Hamilton is nothing but a gold digger. It's clear from Colombo's reactions to this that he is slowly formulating a motive from this information. When Mrs. Chadwick exclaims that she doesn't know who will run the company now that Bryce is dead, Beth re-enters and says that she will do it, and that they will discuss that later.
You aren't even capable of running your own life.
Columbo then asks Beth how the newspaper he found was in the house at all if she hadn't been out that day. She explains that Bryce must have had it with him, and she must have moved it in the confusion. Beth is clearly a little rattled by this. Clark gives a very subtle performance throughout this episode, and the way she plays this scene is a great example of how she conveys Beth's unease without words, with a slight tightening of her jaw and the way she nibbles on a biscuit. The scene ends with a punchline of Colombo insisting he is repaid for the cab fare there and then, and the next scene is at the coroner's court, where a jury has been convened and decided that Bryce's death was the result of an accident and he was not murdered by Beth. This doesn't mean she has been found innocent, just that the police have no reason to investigate the case. But of course that isn't going to stop Colombo. When she's cleared, Beth immediately increases in confidence and starts to organise her life. While Colombo takes Hamilton out to lunch as he's been stood up by Beth, he questions Hamilton and seems satisfied that Hamilton had nothing to do with the murder. But he plants a seed of doubt in Hamilton's mind about Beth's innocence. Columbo then goes to the Chadwick house, where he finds Beth has bought herself a brand new sports car. Columbo then goes snooping around the grounds, to the bemusement of Charles the butler. He then goes to the beauty salon where Beth is getting a makeover, and we are treated to another fun scene with Columbo and his cigar. Columbo inquires with Beth about how she must have ordered the car before Bryce died, which meant she knew she was going to change her style before his death. This scene might also prove that Ice Cube is a secret Columbo fan.
Bye, Felicia.
They both return to the Chadwick home, and he explains that he can't understand how Bryce got to the window without getting any grass on his shoes, as they cut the grass every Thursday morning, and he was shot early on a Thursday. Beth comes up with an excuse, but is much more confident in her answers than she was previously. This also means she is now falling into the trap of many a Columbo foe in coming up with a silly explanation. Columbo then shows her that there was a key hidden in the flower pot, and the imprint has been left behind. Beth says she knows that there was a key there, but that she removed it for security a few weeks ago. Beth is making another murderer mistake here by getting irate with Colombo. We're next treated to a scene of Hamilton with Beth as she shops for clothes, and he starts to notice the change in her. We have a few more scenes like this, but this one is notable because the department store she's in has a full bar in it, and I would love to see that particular trend come back to women's clothing shops. Beth is then at her board meeting where she lays out her vision, whether they like it or not, as well as Hamilton's promotion and their engagement, which he knows nothing about. It's a real shame she's a murderer, who Colombo is definitely going to catch, as it would have been a great story of female empowerment and getting over the odds of a domineering brother and mother and deceased father. Unfortunately, there's the whole murder situation to deal with. She takes command of the company and tells her mother some home truths, causing her mother to shrink. Columbo arrives after the meeting and asks why the burned out bulb in the porch is so clean and new looking when it burned out, and Beth says she insists that her staff clean it regularly. This is another mistake on her part, as it's a pretty poor excuse. She could have just said that it must have been a defective bulb. She does put Columbo exactly in his place though, and as we think we're about to get just one more thing, she stops him and she says that she doesn't want to answer any more questions, to which he replies he wasn't going to ask a question, he just wanted to return the bulb. There's a really good back and forth battle between them. As Columbo has been warned off Beth, he just so happens to turn up the bar where Hamilton is having a drink. He talks with Hamilton and tells him he thinks Hamilton is the key. He has a fantastic memory and must remember something that proves Beth murdered her brother. We then cut to Beth in bed again. There's a noise at the window, and so she grabs her gun again and goes to call the police, before she hesitates and calls out for Columbo. She shuts off the alarm, and as she goes to the window, Columbo comes in through the same door her brother had done. He's there to arrest her. He knew Hamilton heard the shots before he heard the alarm, and has managed to get Hamilton to remember. What's interesting about this particular solution is that it's grounded in a certain amount of reality, and the understanding of psychology. We find out early on that Hamilton has a great memory, and yet he is unable to remember the exact details of the murder without Columbo's reminder. It suggests that his memory of the event was clouded by his feelings for Beth. He wasn't intentionally lying or misremembering at the inquest, as it's established that he is an honest man. His recollection was altered to fit what he believed to be true, that the shots must have come first, before the alarm, because it had to happen in that order. It wouldn't have made any sense for it to happen the other way round. Only when there was a possibility of Beth being capable of murder that his true memory of the event revealed itself to him. People assume memory works like a recording, and that when you need to remember something, you just sort of rewind the recording and play it in your mind. But most people don't remember things in that way at all. It's more like telling yourself a story, and each time you tell the story, it changes slightly to fit your world experiences at the moment you're remembering it. Whether that was the intention of the writer or whether it was just a plot convenience, I'm not sure. But either way, For me, it works perfectly. Beth contemplates shooting Colombo, but he advises against it, with all the policemen apparently outside. The final shot is Colombo at the French windows, lighting his cigar, completely on his own. This, again, is unusual, and not just because Colombo has matches, something he really does, but because normally we don't see much of his reaction once the murderer has been found out. He has an incredibly disappointed look on his face, as if he wishes that he was wrong. I wasn't particularly fond of this episode going in, as I thought it was one of the more average episodes. But I actually really enjoyed it, watching it closely, and I think it's really elevated by the performances of everyone in the cast. And it's really interesting to see all the parts moving together so smoothly. How Columbo manipulates different people at different times for the information that he needs. How Beth gives herself away more and more as she grows into becoming a typical arrogant Columbo murderer. And Nielsen as Hamilton is particularly good at playing against the changes he sees in Beth. The only minor criticism I have is that they could have made Beth a little more cruel rather than becoming just more confident after the murder. It would have worked better for me if she had become more like the rest of her family, rather than the suggestion that her confidence is her biggest vice. Also, her ordering the car well in advance was, I think, an unnecessary detail to show how far ahead she was planning this murder. Everything else, though, is done really, really well. The music isn't overwhelming or out of place. The direction doesn't try anything too experimental, but some of the camera moves and shot selections are really quite cinematic. It shows Norman Lloyd to be a very talented director. All in all, I would have to say that this is 4 out of 5. Not quite up there with suitable for framing, but a much stronger episode than I gave it credit for when I originally watched it. Thank you. Goodbye.